So, Andrew, one of the favorite things in your book, and it's actually a topic of after my own heart, is when you're talking about the improvements you would make to the league, you have a great section about the refereeing in the NBA. And anybody who follows me on Twitter knows that I get passionate about this and I get disgusted by this at least once a year, and probably generally like twice or three times in the playoffs. And now apparently every time the Thunder are involved, I'm going to get disgusted. But I think where I really, 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 really like what you put there was like you had all these nice YouTube links to everything. And I think I must have spent like hours, and my wife is like, "You're not actually reading." No, no, no. It's just I'm going to every single link and watching all these videos. They're great. So I think, I'll let you talk a little bit about that, and then I'll kind of jump in. I was telling you before we started this that I can shoot on referees for an hour.
Mm-hmm. I think I'm a little bit less harsh on referees as you are. In my book, I want to start off by saying also that I don't think the NBA is rigged, and I don't want to get in trouble for anything that so I don't think the NBA is rigged, and I specifically say that in my book. And I'm still critical of referees, and when I sent out my book to a number of people on LinkedIn to review the book and write a testimonial, a few people got back to me and said, "We cannot endorse this book or put our name on it because of the way you are critical of the referees." So, I don't want to say anything that's going to get me in trouble, but as I say in my book, I really think that the referees can be more qualified. I mean, there's plenty of instances that they seem inconsistent from game to game, from ref to ref. It doesn't seem like there's a set system where, a certain contact is going to be considered a foul. One ref can be more lenient, one ref can be more harsh, and that's true, if the ref is in one mood or another mood, or what player the contact is made against. So, I think there has to be more consistency between referees and across games.
Yeah, I think where the trick is, and I think I always tell people, this is not an issue where I'm not saying this is conscious necessarily. I'm saying every study that I've seen, and there's a study at Sloan, there's a statistical study done at Sloan every year. There's at least one. There's multiple ones typically done. What happens is, like, refs are human beings, and human beings are biased, right? They have biases, they're unconscious biases. And I think there's a lot of bias that goes into play in the NBA. Stars get the calls. And there's a reason why in my playoff model, I account for the team with more playoff experience. And it's almost a three-point swing because I'm saying, look, I know that if the Kobe's Lakers were playing like Oklahoma like 3 years back, I knew that the Lakers were going to get every single call. Same thing when they were playing the Nuggets. It's just the nature of the NBA that stars get calls because the refs recognize them and think this is the guy who should be getting a call. And you kind of touch a little bit when you talk about Jordan. I think Jordan's case was a little more extreme. There are certain outcomes that are going to make the NBA as an entity more money. And even though nobody's going to come out and tell you, and I've said this on Twitter as well, I'm willing to say, look, I knew that we weren't getting a Spurs-Pacers finals. This was not happening. Like, if the league had to get the most biased crew they could and get it in a game, and have LeBron, go to the free throw line 50 times or Wade go to the free throw line, that was going to happen because I didn't think that there was too much money. Like, once we get into these sums of money, nobody even has to tell you anything. It's like I was hearing somebody was talking about boosters on one podcast I was hearing. They were saying it's like no, I don't agree with this, and there's there's this bag. He left this bag of money. Should we open it? Right. So it's I don't think things have to be said or things are conscious, but again, there's enough of a body of work to show that referees have biases, and I think there's a great study that was done, which is they looked at whether the bias this was for soccer referees. They looked at what happened when they had this plague and they had to play the games in empty stadiums. And they found that when they played the games in empty stadiums, the home field advantage went away, right? Because the referees weren't calling the game bias. Anybody who's watched the NBA guys in FIBA or James Harden, looking at the FIBA ref going why the hell aren't you giving him that call? Kind of understands that the FIBA ref doesn't care who James Harden is, right? He just is going to call the game pretty straightforward, right? And I think that's where it kind of becomes a weird conversation because I think the problem is the NBA is one of those things like there's absolutely no problem here. And I think where the NBA has to be a little more open and say, look, there are situations, there are problems, and there are things we can do to address them and correct them. And I think if you're not willing to admit there's a problem of any type, right, then you're never actually going to make it better. And I think that's the problem the NBA has.
Let me ask you this. What motivation do you think there is for a referee to give superstars calls? I mean, don't you think he's going to get the ref is going to get paid the same amount? I mean, what yeah.
Well, I think what happens is, one, they have relationships with these guys, right? So it's a seniority concept, it's a relationship concept. So, and you see this time after time after time. It's the older players who get the calls, and it's kind of you can actually look, and there's Ian Levy did some studies on this way back when. I'm trying to remember way back in his old blog. He's now in calculus now, where like he looked at, and you could see that particularly in the playoffs, these guys were getting more calls, and again, you can kind of see this, and it's experience actually does matter, and in the playoffs, for example. But I mean, again, I think what happens is what we see is it actually gets more prevalent the further you go in the playoffs. So the whistles for like and the further you go, so if you've never been to the finals, you're not going to get any calls, right? And it's familiarity. I think it's it's almost like a fraternity, in the sense that you have to kind of go through a certain level of hazing before you get the calls or you get the respect that you would. I mean, look at Jordan's career. Look at Jordan, and I remember Jordan going up against the against the Pistons initially, and getting frustrated in the whole Jordan's rules. It's like part of that was, there's really, Jordan's style was very similar to what Harden does, and, Jordan, same as Harden, wasn't getting any calls against the Pistons. The Pistons were literally mugging him, right? Like, Rodman and Lambeer would throw him down onto the ground, right? And eventually, Jordan started becoming the biggest superstar in the league, and he would get the calls. And I think the other thing, I think you mentioned a little bit in the book, which, I mean, should talk about at length, which is the stars get relationships with the referees, and the referees are as prone to getting starstruck as the next guy, right? So, just because I'm an NBA referee, I'm not immune to the fact that, oh my God, that's LeBron James, or oh my God, that's Kobe Bryant, or oh my God, that's Michael Jordan, right? So I think you mentioned how, like, there's a quote from Kerr where, like, the refs are coming in, like, getting the signatures and the benefits from that. And I think there's something there. And I think the NBA doesn't do a good job at kind of, like, stamping down on that. I think you mentioned the fact that, like, 7 of the referees got indicted by the feds, but they were back on the court, like, was it a year later, 2 years later? So it's because, I mean, the NBA kind of has to set some ethical guidelines if they want to change this, and they have to have some, like, peer review. And I think the other thing is, I think they also need to have, like, a broader group of referees. I mean, Cubans talked about it. Cubans talked about having, like, an academy of referees and having, like, a broader pool. And I think Cuba's been famously victimized, and you had that chart in there, which is he's been famously victimized by the refs. And, I think I mentioned this to you. We had a great conversation last week, which sadly didn't get on the pod, but I mentioned this to you, which is when the guys who make their money gambling on basketball, guys who, like, high rollers who make their money gambling on basketball, like, pay people to keep track of the refs, who's reffing the game, what their tendencies are versus certain players, then that tells you that there is something there. And if that's measurable, and people who make their living out of this are measuring this and keeping track of this, then yeah, it's an issue that the NBA needs to address. Because I think what they don't want to do, and people, I don't know, I mean, you're a guy who's a historian of basketball. I mean, that the basketball was plagued with, like, point shavings. It has been plagued with point shaving scandals throughout its history, and it's the thing that actually has made the game kind of suffer historically, and it's not something that you want. You don't want to be perceived as the WWE, right? You want to be perceived as, like, an up-and-up league, and I think the more transparency you have, the better off it's going to be. I think one thing that's really worrying is, like, did you hear the thing on silver and gambling?
Yeah.
Where Silver's saying, go ahead.
Right. He said basically it's inevitable.
I was actually sitting at Sloan, where it's Malcolm Gladwell was in. Literally, I was sitting about 10 feet from Adam Silver and Malcolm Gladwell, and I was sitting with, like, there were some sharps right next, guys who were, like, I'm not going to mention them, but they were right there, who I know who, like, bet money on games. When Silver literally said, look, we know, he was basically saying that he admitted that they were looking at it, they had plans for it, and they were thinking about gambling and how it affected the bottom line, how they're going to work with the NBA. if you're going to get into that field, then you really have an impetus to fix your referee problem, because right now the gamblers are over here and the league is over here. But once you kind of go like this, then it becomes a real problem. You have to be really, really careful about how transparent you are with the referees.
Did you read Tim Donaghy's book?
Yes.
What did you think about it?
And his blog. I think that he embellishes somewhat. I think, again, I think it's like the Jose Canseco book, if you're familiar with it, where like everyone kind of said like, oh no, he's crazy, he's not telling the truth. But history's kind of proven that he was right. I think Donahue kind of exaggerates how much of that was going on, but I don't think he's, I think if I had to put a number on it, I'd say he's probably like, Pareto, 80% true. And I think he embellishes in the purpose of fiction. And I think anybody who when I watched the 2002 Western Conference Finals, I thought it was a crime against the Kings. I thought the Kings got robbed. I thought the Kings got robbed during the game. I was like, what the hell is going on? This is like, you can look at the amount of fouls they got called for in that game, and it's just completely ridiculous. There's like, Kobe punching the guy, basically. And it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, it's like, well, what's the issue? Well, the incentive was that, like, the league wanted the Lakers in the finals, really. And there was money to be made from having the Lakers in the finals opposed to the Kings. I think that was the year it would have been the Kings versus the Nets, correct, in the finals?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's the same thing. It's the same thing that would have happened if the Pacers had taken a lead in that series. You were not getting the Pacers and the Spurs in the finals. Like the league office would have. I don't think they necessarily would. Again, what you do is you put a point of emphasis. You say, look, people are fouling Shaq. People are always fouling Shaq. Shaq was always getting fouled. Every single game he ever played. It's like Shaq or Wilt or Hakeem were getting fouled. And it's like if the league says, like, today you're going to call fouls on Shaq straight up, and you haven't been calling fouls on Shaq straight up for like a decade, then yeah, you're going to get 40, 50 fouls. And I think it's the same thing. It's like if you wanted to get Wilt over in a game and the league said, we're going to call fouls on Wilt straight up for this game, Wilt is going to put up 80 points, right? So it's the same kind of, it's the problem. And you mentioned it. It's how it's not consistent. And I think that's where like people like me get frustrated when something like that happens. And I think, and I was mentioning it to you last week, which is like, what did you think of the Thunder Clippers series this year?
I mean, reffing determined the series.
Yeah, and it was really kind of sad because I would have rather had a series like the Memphis Thunder series where like the refs really just got out of the way, and we just had like one of the craziest like series that we ever had. And I think we could have had that in the Clippers series, but I mean, again, I don't think the league wanted the Clippers in the next round. They didn't want like Shelley Sterling and Donald Sterling in the Western Conference Finals, or heaven forbid the finals. So I think there was every intention to kind of, and again, it's unconscious. I don't think this is specifically called out, but I think, you're only human. You're going to think like, we really don't want those guys in the finals. So, we don't want the racist owner who's like making the league look bad in the Western Conference Finals. So calls aren't going to go for them. We'd rather have Durant and Russell Westbrook, who are, are big up and coming stars in the Western Conference Finals. And so they're going to get the calls.